Thank you. Well, I'm quite used to attending the CFO event. I've been doing that for many years, and that's kind of got me almost interested in talking to these events. So when I was given the challenge this year of joining yourselves, that was particularly interesting. And I just really wanted to first of all set the expectations, which is not what is the traditional view probably of a CFO of procurement. I was going to try and promise not to mention purchase order or cost reduction in this presentation, but I do mention one of them once, but I promise you it's in a positive manner. So really the context of what I want to talk about is, and I've slightly broadened it from the just how can you impact cash flow to sort of broaden it to the what's the importance, then look at the whole business cycle and the whole of what we're about as a business. And I personally believe that yourselves can bring an impact and a very positive impact to the whole gamut. One thing I often say is the only thing you can be certain is that a business will only ever run out of cash once. Most business failures are ultimately because a business runs out of cash. And as mentioned in the introduction, there are 4 fundamentals, and I think if you can get the fundamentals in place, different balances depending on the particular circumstances, but these 4 things you do need for any business or organisation to prosper. Just to remind, they are organic growth. So there's often a quick fire way to win through acquisition, but generally speaking, organic growth is worth a multiple times more in terms of cash and profit. So growing your business. Not only does it help profitability by increasing revenues, but it actually suggests that you're doing something right. So if people aren't buying more of whatever you're doing, then there is something wrong with either your product or your service. So there's organic growth, margin improvement. So even at flat levels of revenue, how do we get more profit? So again, that's a challenge that we should always be looking for. Cash generation. So to be honest, if you've got the best product or the best service in the world, if you're not actually generating cash, you're doomed. And then finally, on the back of all those, building sustainable business. And really by that, in my context, I mean growing your order book. So you've always got more and more business coming through. So, and I just go through each of those, reflect on my experiences, but then really bringing it back to more the CPO fraternity and where I think both parties can help each other. So the first one for me, and some of these were hinted in the opening session, which I thought was really good. I often find that I can get a lot of market insight. One of the things I've been taught over the years is look to work more and more and understand more the environment you're working in. I think CFOs can often be, probably quite rightfully, criticised as being very inward-looking. It's all about the numbers, what's going into the ledgers, is everything reconciled, are the auditors happy? And I think for all C-suite individuals, the more you understand about the environment you're working in, your clients, the competitors, what's happening, the better. And certainly, as you will well know, that you are one of the particular functions that are spending a lot of time working with organisations outside. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. The next one we have seen, and I'm currently with a law firm, been with them for about a year, but previously I spent 6-7 years with EC Harris LLP, which was a property consulting business, but in the widest sense. Ultimately a set firm of chartered surveyors, but it was very much more about the offerings that we could bring to clients in managing their property life cycle, right from design and procurement through to running and even redesigning the use of whatever building the client had. And we were often keen to take what we call total offerings, and we were always focusing on what we thought was the best outcome for the client, which wasn't necessarily always what they asked us to quote for. But that often brought value. So we saw ourselves as consultants and as working and trusted advisors to the clients to be able to say, well, okay, you've asked for this, but had you thought about this? And this might give you a better outcome for your money. And we couldn't have done that without a lot of suppliers working with us. So if we took a total offering, we at the end of the day were office full of chartered surveyors, bless them now. Whilst they are very good at doing what they're doing, you need far more than just a set of chartered surveyors in running, designing, financing, I don't know, a new airport, a shopping centre, whatever we did. I want just to say as we go through, if anybody wants to fire a question or make a point as I go, please do. The next one, so in terms of organic growth, so growing the business, sustainable solutions. I don't know if that's something you talked to today, but certainly there was a lot of pressure for us in effect if you are looking to develop or redevelop a site, put up a new building. A lot of our clients were often government backed, be it health, education. So there was always a big drive around sustainable solutions. And again, being chartered surveyors or building surveyors and designers, yes, we're aware of the issues, but unless you can secure those through your supply chain of advisors, you're really, to a large degree, in their hands. So again, working through our procurement specialists, we would look to secure the services of those that can really enhance that part of our offering. And another one, this was mentioned earlier, so I'm slightly disadvantaged now because a lot of these points I've already made. All I can assure you is this presentation was submitted 2 weeks ago, so I haven't added to it quietly while I've been sat in the room on my iPad. Another one we thought was absolutely vital was client retention. So we used to work, without getting into how we managed clients, very much our top 20 clients. We had 10 clients who delivered more than 10, 15 million in revenue a year. The next 20 we targeted to get to that. And that's all through client retention. And we could only do that, again, if we got ourselves into the position of trusted advisor. And because we were often advising on multi-million pound developments, we needed a lot of people working with us. So our procurement teams were almost part of our selling effort at sometimes. And actually at times, on many occasions, our procurement actually moved to fee earning. I don't know if anybody's had experience of that within your organisation. It's probably slightly easier on the consultancy side, but often if we delivered such a good perceived level of service in whatever we did, we were often asked to then unleash our head of procurement on client organisations. So that's probably good, knowing him. So for instance, if we were looking at, say, taking on the operation, the day-to-day running of a hospital, we had the experience, we had some health professionals who'd moved across and worked with us, so we understood what was required of a hospital, but they were very keen to understand sometimes how we procured and where we procured and where we'd be sourcing some of the things. I mean, there was certain things were given, so certain, for instance, surgical instruments and medicines were dealt with separately, but how we procured some of the services that would then impact their day-to-day running. They were very keen to understand what our processes were. So we'd naturally take our head of procurement along and say, this is how he works, this is how we'll work with either the suppliers you want us to work with, or they'd give us a list. So they were keen to understand, because at times we were often representing the client with their trusted suppliers. So sometimes we were forming like an outsourced service. So they were keen to ensure that we continued the relationships that they'd built in the past. At times he could have gone in, he would then go in and perhaps say, well, I think you could do this and this better, or there's a different way of doing it. And at times then, sometimes it's word of mouth. You get a call from, I understand you've been talking to Hospital X, we're thinking of doing something similar, could you come in and do a feasibility study of how you might be able to bring what you've done there to us. Margin improvement. So all of the above. So if at the end of the day you're steady state but you're selling more, that will improve your margins, because if a large part of your costs are fixed and you're getting more revenues, that increases your profits. And I promised and I failed, but this is the only time I mention it. So cost reduction. it is the place to go because you are the experts. You know sometimes how to get the same for less. Well, not sometimes, no, you always know. So sometimes there's a drive. So I think there's no getting away from the fact that at times we will come and look to you for cost reduction, and that ultimately then does help profits and cash flows. But also, and again, working back to what I talked about earlier and the way our procurement people worked with our clients, there are times where we can charge more for cost neutral improvements. So for instance, there was one client where we secured a longer term, better contract, and that security was one of the challenges given to us by our clients. So whilst we remained cost neutral, that was part of the overall delivery. And because they wanted security of supply, that then enabled us to charge more in effect for what we delivered in line with target. The next one on margin improvement, again, I'm teaching you to suck eggs now, but I've put down everything I could think of. But I have seen where you could leverage high volumes from high organic growth. So again, sometimes pricing, sometimes maybe terms of payment. Again, if you're in a much stronger relationship, you can probably get better terms of payment. And again, this is as much around profit as it is cash. Sometimes there are things you can do around cash flows. Cash generation. So having got the business growing, having got the margin improving, what can we do on actual cash generation? Well, again, all of the above feed through to cash. Terms of payment, again, I'm sure you've all been beaten seriously around the head by your CFOs to improve terms of payment. One thing I've found, though, is that what also helps from a client side. So if you've delivered what you're supposed to deliver, when you're supposed to deliver it to the standard, they generally quite quickly run out of excuses to pay you. They'll find one. I mean, I could find one. But generally speaking, if you're working with clients that you trust, they will pay you. If you've done what you said you'd do when you do it, they will pay you. If they don't, then I'd just say you've maybe got an issue with the relationship.
This is an observation you'd hardly not want to pay a law firm one time when they've done the job, says to you.
You may think that I couldn't possibly comment. I've got problems getting the bills out with the law firm, never mind. So a sustainable business. So the last of the four, before I move on to some examples. So for me, a sustainable business is all about, i.e. not doing what you might do in a panic in a recession, which is cut costs and focus on about this year's profit. So for me, a sustainable business is all about delivering profits in line with what your expectations were as far as possible in the current year, whilst not completely trashing future years. For instance, cutting marketing costs, selling, business and development, etc., etc. Yes, it saves overhead in the year concerned, but going forward, you'll notice a marked deterioration. So in terms of sustainable business, one of the big ones is the actual sustainability. So again, a sort of double meaning of the same word. So I'm not here meaning sustainable as in it's going to keep going for the next 5-10 years. But sustainability is a huge issue with businesses these days, and rightly so. And a lot of people refer to the triple bottom line, be it economic, which is the slightly more traditional one, which I admittedly focus on more because of my role. But then you've got the whole piece about the environmental challenges, which I'm sure you're all well aware of and it impacts you day on day, and also the social. We do a lot of work for charities in London. So we're based Camden, right on High Holborn. We do a lot of work there, and we do sometimes bring in some of our suppliers. So again, we are doing it as a partnership. So again, that kind of helps play to some of our commitments. So what I thought I'd quickly do to wrap up was go through what I see as a traditional business cycle and just recap on the sort of areas as we move through what I class as the business cycle as to where I've seen and always look to see the CPO help. So first of all, just to very quickly whistle through the business cycle, and what I mean by this is how do you get from our clients or customers through to cash in the bank. We'll start with the clients. We have, you can hardly read some of these, so I apologise. So we have actual clients, target clients. They've got a pipeline of activities, be it orders for products or you're talking about prospective services. When you secure that work, it goes into the order book. So the selling function and marketing, they've done their job. We've actually got work we need to deliver or product we need to manufacture and deliver. What that then does from a financial perspective is drive your revenue projections. This is slightly more biased towards a consultancy business. So we use our revenue projections to drive everything. And if our costs, 85-90% of our costs are people. Most businesses, to a degree, view people costs as fixed or semi-fixed. Certainly, there's a 3 to 6 month lag if you're going to manage levels of resource, putting it in a politically correct way. If you're going to manage that, your resourcing, there's a 3 to 6 month lag because there's usually quite a cost up front before you see savings come through. So you've got resource management, that then drives your cost base, or direct costs, which in our case, as I said earlier, over 80% of our cost are people costs. We have then other costs, so travel, consumables, goods and services we buy in to help us deliver our services. That's impacted by margin drivers. So you've got your revenues, your costs, that all goes into your P&L projections. And then from your P&L projections, you can quite easily do your cash cycle projections, which ultimately will then drive how you manage the cash into the business. So for me, there are 4 big areas. So for the whole business cycle, I think the 4 major areas where I see procurement being absolutely vital. First one is in the clients. So I've talked earlier, the whole piece about security of offering, almost at times improving the offering to the clients. I think there's a huge piece of work that can be done and value brought in terms of the way, certainly the businesses I've worked in, we work with our clients, secure the clients and retain the clients. Resource management. This really then depends. I think if you're in a manufacturing environment, it's not so much resource as product, and I think that's just huge. Not my area of expertise, but certainly in resourcing management, sometimes if we go out to subcontract or look to bring in contractors or bought in services, we would very much use procurement there. So it's similar but not quite the same. Big area there. Direct costs, certainly on the overhead. So for instance, our procurement will drive our property deals. So being a people-based business, we spend a lot of money on property, travel, etc., training, consumables, all those sorts of things. And all of that would go through our procurement function. So big impact there. And finally, the cash cycle projections. As I said earlier, a lot of what you can do can impact both outflows to suppliers, but also help to protect the inflows from the clients if we've delivered what we said we'd deliver when we deliver it. So I think there's a huge piece of work there. So for me, procurement can actually and does actually impact directly and indirectly to some degree the whole of our business cycle.
Just on that cycle there,
Yep.
where would you see innovation coming in? So we've just come from next door, it's all about the world is changing.
Yep.
So and I see procurement as really gathering that kind of information around innovation, what their suppliers are doing, and bringing that to the table.
Yep.
Where would you see that fitting into
Probably all over. First of all, there's an expectation there. I was talking to somebody earlier. There's a law firm in the US. They're not quite ambulance chasers, but they've over many years developed this business where they'll do it's no win, no fee. But they're sometimes in corporate prosecutions, etc., deals. They used to have a fairly stringent process in place where it could be 7 to 14 days before they decided if they took a case on. And what they'd have is very senior partners looking at the case, what they knew about it, and then almost reflecting upon previous experiences, going back to old cases they'd won, cases they'd lost. And it could take, and then it would go through a series of 2 to 3 levels before they decided on some of the bigger cases if they took the case on. What they then did was, and don't ask me how, but they used this phrase, digitise all of their case history and they took the 2 weeks committee work to about 30 seconds, having had somebody of a very senior level complete on the screen the various parameters that are required. But then this was proven to be at least as accurate, because all it did was it did what it took people 2 weeks to do, and it did it in less than a minute. So that's one example. So where you can impact, well, you can obviously.
Can you elaborate? Who would have been involved in looking at that screen together? I mean, how many people across the board? How many functions?
So this is.
Was that accountability by a single person, or?
There would be a senior partner who completed the parameters, and it would then give the decision. It would then go for a sign-off by the, I think it was a management committee of 2 to 3. Yes. So there were the two steps, but the middle bit, which was the 2 weeks of flicking through books, files, and doing a lot of research, that just disappeared. And that was probably not for finance or procurement, but that's just an example. But my point is, you are dealing with the outside world a lot more than, say, finance. You know, we are generally inwardly looking control freaks, apparently. But, you know, you're going to be dealing with people outside of the organisation, so that's my point. Maybe to a degree with our clients and customers, but certainly with our suppliers. And if there's something happening there, and it's about the vertical integration, it will start to feed through. So where would it impact? Certainly in working with clients, but also suppliers. Certainly here, you know, we're working more and more now with firms that can provide us a lawyer at half an hour's notice, and it's all done through technology. So we've had to go and source the right level of suppliers. There are, in theory, quality checks, etc., on lawyers. So i.e., if they've passed their exams, they are deemed competent. We can all have that debate maybe over the bar tonight as to whether lawyers or even CFOs are competent. But also I think here how we procure travel, how we procure, you know, accommodation, all those sorts of things have moved on. So again, I think it's right across the piece. So that was a whistle-stop tour. So any questions or remarks? Or